joined us. I am Jane from the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center. We refer to our agency as CPAC. For those of you who are not familiar with CPAC, we are Connecticut's Parent Training and Information Center under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We are staffed by parents of children with disabilities, or adults with disabilities in my case, who understand what families are experiencing and know what it's like to be a parent of a child with needs. It's our goal to empower parents to advocate effectively for their children with disabilities. As we get started, we'd like to ask that folks keep their questions more broad. And if you have individual personal questions, we're happy to take them at CPAC one-on-one and help you address your concerns. Our call center is open Monday through Friday, 860, I'll put it in the chat also, 860-739-3089. Also, none of this information should be construed as legal advice, as none of us are attorneys. And let's get going. I'd like to turn the presentation on the transition from birth to 3 to public school over to our team. And I think, Andrea, you want to get us started?
Thanks a lot, Jane. Thank you very much for having us here. So today I'm here with 2 of my colleagues to talk about transition from birth to 3 to public schools. I'm Andrea Brunell and we can go to the next slide. I am Andrea Brunell from the Connecticut State Department of Education. My role there is the IDEA, the Individuals with Disability Education Act coordinator for IDEA Part B, which is preschool special education. And I'm going to have my colleagues, Adriana and Nicole, introduce themselves as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nicole Cassette, and I'm with the Office of Early Childhood, and my role is the Part C coordinator for birth to 3.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adriana Fontaine, and I'm the Early Childhood Supports Programs Manager at the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center.
Thanks, Nicole and Adriana. Today, we're going to talk to you a little bit about Connecticut's birth to 3 system. We're going to talk about birth to 3 and preschool special ed transition, a little bit about the process and procedures of the transition. And we're going to specifically talk about the different roles and responsibilities of our birth to 3 system, our school districts, and also as parents, what are the rights and responsibilities having to do with transition between IDEA Part C to Part B. And I'm going to turn it over to Adriana to talk to you a little bit about some of the vocabulary we use.
Thanks, Andrea. So now we're going to do a little refresher of some of the acronyms that will come up in throughout the presentation. So we're going to start with RESC. That's the Regional Educational Service Center. These are nonprofit fee-for-service public education agencies, and they provide quality, cost-effective resources and programs and services to Connecticut's public schools. The next one is very important, is IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the governing special education law that makes available a free appropriate public education to eligible children with disabilities throughout the nation. The next one is the SDE, the State Department of Ed, and they're in charge of providing equal opportunity and excellence in education for all of Connecticut students. The OEC, which is the Office of Early Childhood, that's our state agency that oversees a network of programs and services that help young children and their families thrive. They also support providers, teachers, and other professionals, including birth to 3. DDS, which is a state agency, is the Department of Developmental Services. They provide services to individuals with developmental disabilities and their families, including services for children in the autism spectrum disorder. The next one is your IFSP for families. That's the Individualized Family Service Plan. And this plan is a legal written document, and it outlines the early intervention services for your child and for your family. The next one is the IEP, which is the Individualized Education Program. It is also a legal written document that spells out the program of special ed instruction, supports, related services, supplemental aids, modifications that students with disabilities need to make progress and participate in age-appropriate school activities. And finally, CPAC, which Jane described in the beginning of the session. The only thing I'm going to say is that we do have 2 early childhood support programs. The first one is Family Connections for families enrolled in birth to 3, and the next one is the Preschool Pathfinder, which is for families who are going through transition and having difficulties or have any questions. So you can see there are many acronyms and terms in early childhood special education, and the State Department of Ed has put together a glossary document, which we're going to put the link in the chat, and it's called Common Terminology in Early Childhood Special Education. So keep that in mind and take a look at it.
And I am working to get the link I have for some reason is not working. So I will work to get that link in there while I turn it over to Nicole to give you some information about birth to 3 early intervention.
Thanks, Adriana and Andrea. So first, we're going to give a high-level overview of birth to 3, but I want to first point you to birth3.org, which is our website that for early intervention in Connecticut. On our website, you will find information related to policy and procedures, service guidelines. You will also, which is important, be able to find which providers serve each town. So that would be under programs, and each of these in the top right-hand corner, you'll see there are what they call parent pages, which will lead to more further information. So if you went under for families or programs, you would be able to find which provider support each town. And then there are town pages with links to the ECSE contacts in each town, and then family guides. And there's a great one on transitions. That is birth3.org. And Andrea will be putting that into the chat as well. Additionally, there are referrals, and on our homepage, you can if you have a question, you have the number 1-800-505-7000. Or if you are in birth to 3 currently, you can call the 1-866-888-4188 phone number that is listed there. Beginning in 1993, Connecticut's mission statement is to strengthen the capacity of Connecticut's families to meet the developmental and health-related needs of their infants and toddlers who have developmental delay or disabilities. This really is a mission statement that is suited throughout all of early intervention in Connecticut. It informs all of our federal reporting. It informs all of the evidence-based practices that are implemented in Connecticut, and it also impacts our strategic planning. With that, there is a uniform message as well. So this important message being that birth to 3 supports families to enhance the development of their child and connect to their communities. So one thing that I often will say is, if you're here, think about how this might be different from school systems, and we'll talk about that later. But really, this is the uniform message that Connecticut Birth to 3 system has. So the supporting of families. So one question that I have for you all is, what is birth to 3? You can pop it in the chat or you can unmute and speak. We only have, I think, 6 participants here today. So is it a system or is it a program?
There are some folks on Facebook right now as well. And if you want to post anything in chat or in the comments, we will carry them over into the Zoom chat.
Thank you, Jane. I see a system in the chat, which is great. So that it really is a system. It's not a specific program, but for most families, it's all birth to 3. So that's one thing that we often like to outline, is that birth to 3 is the system, and then we have programs underneath. On the next slide, we'll give you an overview of birth to 3 from the 10,000-foot view. So we have currently 19 programs in the system. So you, if you're a family who is enrolled in birth to 3, you might be with, there is Correct Sound Bridge, there is CREC, there's Easter Seals. We have 19 of them. So there's 19 programs that are within the system. The OEC in the top left is the Office of Early Childhood, where the lead agency sits. So that's where myself and my colleagues are in looking at the system from a systematic viewpoint. And then where supports are delivered, they are in the community. So they are in the infant and toddler's home. They are perhaps at the grocery store. They may be at restaurants. It really is where the family needs the supports. And in the center of the screen, you'll see a computer. So that reflects remote early intervention. And in March of 2020, remote early intervention was implemented in the state of Connecticut as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, remote EI is here to stay, and it will be here long after. So there's always that option to have supports remotely as well. So next, I'm going to give you, again, a very high-level overview. Our PD partners, Colleen, Sabrina, they can talk about our system for hours, and there are day-long trainings about the system. So if you have any further questions after the presentation today about referrals, evals, and supports, you can reach out to us. You can contact us at the CT Birth23 email, which I will put into the chat after. And you can also go to our website and find further information. But first, if there is a concern, an identified concern, how do families get referred to birth to 3? Well, anyone can refer a child, so that could be the family. In fact, most of our referrals do come through families at the recommendation of their pediatrician. Pediatricians can also submit referrals, childcare, there also may be DCF. But the important thing to note is that families must agree to the evaluation and be present for the evaluation. In Connecticut, there is a single point of entry, and that is 211 Child Development, formerly 211 Child Development Info Line. And these referrals can be done by voice at the phone number below. It can also be faxed in, and that online fax referral is on our website. Once the referral is made and the family accepts the referral, there will be an evaluation. So 2 early intervention professionals, so that could be occupational therapy, physical therapy, teachers, speech and language pathology, and so on and so forth, they will perform the evaluation. And this is done by activity-based discussions and standardized normalized referencing tools. And that outlines self-help skills, personal social skills, motor skills, which include fine and gross motor, communication, receptive and expressive, and cognitive skills. There's also a health history collected at the evaluation, nutrition, vision, hearing, so there's additional information collected. Additionally, if a child is over the age of 16 months, there will an MCHAT will be performed and we assess the need for an autism evaluation if it is needed.
Nicole, can you tell us a little bit about that? How is that decided?
So the MCHAT is a screening tool that is used if a child screens where autism would be a concern. The program would discuss the ADOS or another further evaluation tool. So that I don't know how specific you'd like me to go. We could go much more into detail. I just don't know.
Well, I guess my question might have been, not every child will get it.
No.
The MCHAT. So if the team has a concern, they will do it by their 16-month.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so then a child will either be determined eligible or ineligible for the system. If they are determined eligible, they will receive supports. Additionally, I should note that there are some auto-eligible cases for kiddos. So children who are deaf and hard of hearing are automatically eligible for the system. If there is elevated levels, that would be an automatically eligible condition that a child may have. That is on our website, all of that information, and you can look up what auto-eligible, our auto eligibility is there.
That might also bear, Andrea, I don't know if you feel this way, but there's nothing in the special ed world that is an auto eligibility. So birth to 3 has conditions that qualify children automatically, but preschool and up do not have any conditions that meet such a criteria.
That's correct. There's very specific eligibility in Part B, which is starts after birth to 3 with regard to eligibility, and that's we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between the two.
All right, so once a child is determined eligible, they will have an IFSP written, so that individualized family service plan, and then they will begin receiving support. So supports are delivered in natural learning environments, and that is in the child's home, in their community. And that leads to this natural learning opportunities that are available in everyday life. So the goal is to really increase the child participation and really having families work with their child in everyday activities. And we'll see the importance of it in just a moment. But this really starts with the activity and not the skill and learning opportunities that are present in everyday life for the child. It builds the caregiver competence and also leads to strategies and skill development. So why is this all important? Well, there was a really great research article by Karen Adolph of Typically Developing Toddlers. And what this research led to is that children learn by incredible amounts of practice. So on average, to walk, a child will practice for 3 to 6 months and walk 9,000 steps. And that is actually equates to 29 football fields per day. So a toddler is walking 29 football fields per day to practice walking and really hone in on that skill set. So this leads to that idea that need to get this into everyday routine with familiar people. So there is that incredible amount of practice that with other things other than just walking, but this is the research that we often will lean on. And that is really honing in on the importance of everyday activities for the child so that they can continue to practice outside of the supports being delivered. So if a family, say, is receiving an hour of supports per week, embedding everyday activities in that hour will lead to the child continuously practicing in between supports. So how is this performed? So Birth to 3 uses coaching as a style of interaction. So I want to really point that out. It really is a style of interaction. So we're going to watch a quick video and then we'll talk a little bit more about coaching. But first I want to outline, and there is a longer video on our website. I could post that in the chat as well once this loads. And please let me know if you do not hear it.
I love a joint plan because families are focused, they come up with the ideas. There's so much better chance that they're, number one, going to practice and carry over strategies that we did. And then when we start the next week, we're all on board and ready to go. The goals that Hattie's parents identified were she wants to be independent, little girl. What she finds challenging is how to move her body from one position to another and how to move from one place to another. So what we've been trying to work together to figure out is what motivates Hattie? What activity does she enjoy doing? Hattie's so motivated by brushing her teeth. If we're thinking about where we might go with this, it looked like getting into the chair, we're still building that. Tell me what you'd like my help with the next time we come out.
Definitely trying to, help her get on this chair just because she knows already how to get on the other one. So I would like to do that. And obviously, help her, which is something that we always do to help her move on her own.
I have tons of strategies in my head, but a parent knows their child best. They come up with the best ideas or what motivates their child or what's going to work in their family, in their life.
A coach understands that the coachee is the expert in their own life. They're their own expert in their own environment.
The relationship building is really, really, really important, and we always need to remember that. So it starts with the relationship. It starts with building that relationship. Recognize it's going to be a partnership. You're going to do this together, and everyone looks at things differently.
So 2 things I really want to highlight from this video is that it's the relationship and then that partnership with the families, and that families know their child best. So that really leads to that importance of this style of interaction and building upon the family's confidence. Coaching also supports parents during their everyday activities. the parent is using the strategies with their child during the visits, and it builds upon the ideas that parents have. So sharing information, it's not couching, it's not that early interventionists don't do anything but coach the family. There is sharing of information and that modeling. So if it's needed, it will occur during the session. Again, this is a high level overview. Coaching and the style of interaction here could be a day-long training. So if you have further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. There's also a primary service provider approach to teaming. So every child has a and every family has a full team. So what this really is that one interventionist is functioning as the primary support to a family based on the family's needs. So that might be that an OT is going out and providing supports to the family. That does not mean that the family does not have access to further supports. There's a full team behind this interventionist, and joint teaming can occur, and joint visits can occur with families so that families can have support from other disciplines if needed, or some joint teaming within this. So this strengthens the parents' confidence and competence in promoting that child learning and the development. It is a misconception that this primary service provider approach leads to a family only having one. So I really want to stress that every family and every child has a team behind them. So it really is just that one person who is regularly perhaps seeing the family, but there are joint visits as necessary. And here is where I'm going to kick it over to my colleague, Andrea.
Thank you very much, Nicole. So Nicole and Adriana and Jane have heard me say this is my favorite slide, that we really are here to talk to you about the fact that there really are two systems. We work together. We're both under IDEA, but there is IDEA Part C, which Nicole has given you an overview of, which is Part C, that's early intervention, and that's for very young children. Then there's IDEA Part B, which is preschool special education, and what we're talking about today. And, you know, while I have pictures of fruit here, they're both fruit, they're both under IDEA, they are still different. They still have differences. So what we'd like to do today is give you a little bit about the differences between the two systems. But before I get into those differences, I'm going to turn it over to Adriana, who's going to talk to you a little bit about how parents sometimes feel when they're going from one system to the other system.
Thanks, Andrea. So yes, so how do families feel? And I think we're all familiar with this cute coyote, and we know how the story goes. He's going full force, he's chasing the road runner, and all of a sudden, boop, comes the end of the road. And families feel like that. They feel like he's the end of the road. So this image is really worth 1,000 words because it reflects how they feel. Transitioning from a relative comfort of a family-centered natural environment practices based with coaching principles, like Nicole said, to an on-site pre-K program can be stressful, intimidating for families. There's a new team, there's new rules, and there's sometimes even the idea of a big bus also stresses families. So they feel like they're losing a little bit of the control they had over the learning program for their child. And as we saw in the video that Nicole showed, families are experts in their own environment in life. So as they transition, they might feel like they're losing a little bit this control. And some parents refer to it as the feeling of falling off a cliff. The idea is that we can help families feel less overwhelmed and more supported by starting this process early on and by preparing families. They need to be informed of the new procedures, the timelines, the team member roles, their rights, and even their own responsibilities throughout this process. They need to know how the system works. By starting this process early, professionals from the school can get to know the child and the family and start to build a relationship that helps families to leave the support of their Birth to Three program with more ease. Also, stressful situations can be alleviated when professionals really get to know the child and talk to the family about their questions long before concerns become problems. Like Nicole said earlier, families know their child the most. But sometimes families feel a little bit intimidated by a team of specialists, very knowledgeable, and sometimes families can lose sight of how much they know. So we can help them really to understand the role and providing information about their child's strengths and needs. They have to be eloquently able to say everything they know about their child, because this information is as important as the observations or evaluations of professionals in their team. So they need to feel included, valued, respected, and feel like they're an equal partner, because they really are.
Thanks, Adriana. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what happens when a child is about to turn 3. So when a child's about to turn 3 and they're participating in birth to 3, notification is sent with your parent's permission to the school district when a child is 2.5 years old. There's then transition planning, again, with parent consent, when that is sent over. And knowing that if a child is eligible for Part B for preschool special education, it's required that an IEP, an individual education program, is developed for the child on or before their 3rd birthday. And we refer to that as FAPE at 3. And we're required to report data with regard to FAPE at 3 to the federal government. And our target is that in Connecticut, we need to do this 100% of the time. So any child that is eligible upon that transition from Part C to Part B has to have that IEP in place on or before their 3rd birthday. And again, we're responsible to report that to the federal government. So we have mentioned to you the different responsibilities between birth to 3 and the LEA. And remember, the LEA is the local education agency, often referred to as the school district. So I'm not going to go into each of these forms, but I wanted you to be able to sort of see this grid so you know that there are different responsibilities by both birth to 3 for even when it's paperwork and convening certain meetings, that birth to 3 has some responsibilities and the school district has some responsibilities. So birth to 3 in general is responsible, with parents' permission, to get information over to the school district and to begin that process of transition planning. The school district is then required to convene something called a planning and placement team meeting to discuss if, in fact, that child is going to be eligible for those Part B services. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the transition planning and the different meetings that are going to occur that are responsible for both Part C and Part B. So the first thing that we'll mention is that there's something called a transition conference. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but that is a birth to 3 meeting. And it's very important that the school district participates in that meeting, but it is a meeting that's held by birth to 3. So families can get to know a little bit more about that school district and can start to develop that relationship with the school district during that transition. The next thing that will happen is going to be the planning and placement team process. And this next slide looks a little bit complicated, and I'm going to go over it at sort of the 10,000-foot level, but I wanted to make sure that everything is on the slide for you. And I know it's overwhelming. Even I'm looking at the slide thinking that's just overwhelming to look at the slide to see all these different things that are happening. What you need to know is that referral is made. So the parent gives permission to refer that child to the school district. And then there are 2 planning and placement team meetings that need to happen. And we call them PPTs. And there's PPT 1, and that's where the whole team gets together and discusses the referral and designs an evaluation. And parent input and family input is very important at this point because, as both Nicole and Adriana said, families know their child better than anyone else. So they help that PPT develop what kind of assessment is going to be able to get a good look at that child in every area of suspected disability. So that's what PPT 1 is for. The second PPT, or planning and placement team, is going to be to go over all of those evaluation results and determine if the child is eligible for special education. Excuse me. what we need to remember, and Jane brought this up, is that the eligibility is different between Part C and Part B, where there is some automatic eligibility in Part C. There is no automatic eligibilities in Part B. In order to be eligible for special education in Part B, there needs to be a disability, and there needs to be a requirement that the child requires specialized instruction and possibly related services to access their education. So you're going to notice even there's a difference in the name of the plans. There's the individual family service plan when a child is in Part C, and you see the big F in there, family, and then the IEP, the individualized education program, for when a child turns 3. So the focus becomes very different. There's a family focus from birth to 3, and then when the transition happens to Part B, there is that educational focus.
I do think it's important to talk about the fact that there are children who may have an identified disability. For example, I'll use autism because that's the one that people call our office about, and say, how could my child who has a medical diagnosis of autism not be eligible for preschool special education services? And it's because of what we're talking about. I think Andrea's point of they need to require specialized instruction in order to, that's a critical element of eligibility. So just having a disability unto itself is not the eligibility criteria. And I think that's something that parents really struggle with.
Absolutely. And I think when we talk about autism, we then get a little bit complicated because there's a difference between a medical diagnosis of a disabling condition and an educational classification. And it can be really complicated and sort of twisty-turny, and it can be difficult to sort of wrap your head around that whole thing. And that's why it's really important that if you have questions about any of those things, the consultants at CPAC are wonderful at helping to sort of untangle all of those different rules and requirements between the two different parts of IDEA, because it can be really complicated. And even people who have been operating in this world for many, many years, sometimes we have to take a step back and sort of say, let's lay everything out and look at each individual component so we can better understand what things are going on. So I left this slide a little bit complicated so you can have it as part of the presentation, but know that we don't expect parents to be able to really dig in and understand all the different intricacies here. What's important for you to know is that there's a process that we need to go through, and that it's different than the process that is involved in birth to 3, and the eligibility is different. So it can be, as I said, and Jane alluded to, it can be sort of complicated and confusing. And that's why it's important for you to know who you can ask questions as you're going through this process. And it's also important that if a family has been with birth to 3, they have a good relationship with that provider. And we really want those relationships to develop with the school district as well. But knowing that you know your child better than anybody else, being it for you as families to be able to have conversations about your child's strengths and your child's weaknesses is a really important part of the process.
Thank you.
So one of the things that you may hear about is something called Child Find. If you could, thank you. So Child Find is a requirement that school districts have for locating any child that may have a disability that could impact their education. And Adriana and Nicole and I wanted to make sure that you all know about a new law that went into effect this past summer in Connecticut, that if there's a child that's not found eligible when they transition from Part C, early intervention, to Part B, we are now required to make sure that families have access to a developmental and social and emotional screening. And in Connecticut, we're super fortunate to have something called Sparkler. And Sparkler is an app that you can go to either the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store and download on your phone. It's free. And what it contains is something called the Ages and Stages Questionnaire and the Ages and Stages Questionnaire for Social and Emotional Development. And you can answer questions about your child in the app. And if there's any cause for concern, you will get reached out to by 211 Child Development. And it's possible that your child may need to be referred at a later date, or they may help you with some additional activities or help you with a referral. The other thing to know about Sparkler is, I feel like I'm doing a sales pitch for Sparkler, but it really is as wonderful as I'm making it out to be. It also has activities that are based in our early learning and development standards for you to be able to do with your child to support their development, not activities on your phone. It's not, electronic based. It's hands-on activities for you to be able to do with your child at home and in the community to support their development. And they are based on the Connecticut Early Learning and Development Standards. So it's a really good thing for you to know about. Again, there's no charge to you. And many school districts have a special code that you can enter. And when you download the app, it'll give you a listing. And what will happen is the information, with your permission, will get sent directly to your district, and they can sort of assist you if there's any issues in that way as well. So it's a wonderful app. You don't have to do anything other than download it onto your phone, and you can start using it right away. If you have any questions about Sparkler, certainly you can be in touch with CPAC. You can reach out to Nicole, you can reach out to me, and we can certainly get you to the right person if you have any questions or issues with Sparkler. But it's a really wonderful app, and very, very worthwhile to take a couple minutes and download it onto your phone. So just jumping around a little bit, I had mentioned something called the Transition Conference, and I had mentioned that it is a meeting that is convened by Birth to Three, and it really is to start developing that relationship with the public school. And I'm going to turn it over to Adriana, who's going to talk a little bit more about why the Transition Conference is so important.
Thanks, Andrea. And yes, so basically it's a meeting run by Birth to Three, but there's many moving parts in this transition conference, and relationships can be built throughout this transition process at all levels. So we have Birth to Three's relationship with the family. We also have Birth to Three relationship with the district, and the district's relationship with the family. In the past sessions that we conducted, we had a couple of questions from providers asking about what was the level of expectation for the district to participate in Birth to Three Transition Conference. And I just want to highlight that that is a must. They need to be invited, and families need to know that they need to be invited. So that's why relationships are so important. The relationships that Birth to Three have with the local education agencies or school districts are very important. They need to create a system that works for them, and their system is going to look different from what another agency might have with another district. But the idea is that if they have a good system between themselves, they're not going to be missing out critical time in this process. And going back to the analogy of families feeling like they're falling off a cliff, I am emphasizing that it is because they're switching from a family center to a child center. Families really are going to miss that. So some families say, I never put that together, but I was part of everything, and now I'm gonna feel like I'm not. So if we can build really solid relationships between the providers and the districts, we are going to be able to prevent that cliff experience. And we are also building a smooth transition, and parents can be prevented from having that experience altogether. The reality is that we need to look at this transition conference from the lens of relationships. What is the family going to need during this transition? Parents up until now, like I said, had total control and involvement over the planning and execution of their Birth to Three experience, and that's going to change once they're in the district. So helping families to prepare for that change is part of the task that providers have, and that's how relationships are built. So if you help them understand and anticipate for this change, they will be more prepared for it. And if the local education agencies or the school districts are considerate about this, in the sense that they know that they're involved, they know that they were in birth to three and they were in charge of their child's development through coaching, the school can provide some level of involvement as well. And this will really work through that strong relationship building. So that's one part of it. They want to reinforce their child learning. So keep that in mind. Communication, respect, encouragement of this is very important for families. And for families, I would say that to build a working relationship with your team is really to get to know what the members are, what their roles and responsibilities, and how to get in touch with them. Remember that your team might change, more providers could be added, some might leave, but one thing will never change in your child's education is you. So this is why your role is so important. And this is why it's your responsibility to become an effective advocate for your child by getting prepared, getting organized, asking lots of questions during this transition conference, and communicating clearly and with confidence. And that takes time to build. But you and your other members cannot do the job alone. You all need together. So learning how to work as an equal team member will help you feel very empowered during this transition conference. So again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call CPAC. We have programs, support programs for families who are going through transition, and we can help you every step of the way. And I think now we are going to go back to Andrea, I think, or Nicole.
Nope, actually, you led right into this slide. So Adriana was talking about family, and we all have, but really families knowing their children best. So at the transition conference, really having families being able to advocate for their child and identifying their child's needs and abilities for the school district. That is not done alone. So actually, in early intervention, the state identified measurable result that is reported to the Office of Special Education and Programs is actually, as a result of early intervention, families will be better able to talk about their child's abilities and challenges. So it really is to prep families in order to identify the abilities and challenges of their children, so that once the birth to three transition conference or the PPTs occur, families are able to describe these. Additionally, I'd like to outline that the role of birth to three is to support the family, describe their child's abilities and challenges at the PPT. It's not to advocate. So birth to three is really there to support you all as families. Additionally, the PPTs, I will let Andrea speak to this, but they're the LEA meetings, separate from the transition conference.
And that's important to know, because it is possible to have meetings back to back. So it's possible that the LEA will come either do it virtually these days or come out to your home for a transition conference, and that is a birth to three meeting. And then they may end that meeting and say, okay, we're ending the transition conference, and we're now, even though we're all still sitting in the same room together, we're now going to turn this into a planning and placement team meeting. That isn't the practice we encourage the most. We encourage things to be very, very separate, but we know sometimes that does happen. But what's important for families to know is that the transition conference and the PPTs are two separate things, that even when they're held back to back, they are not the same meeting. So the transition conference is really to help develop those relationships and to start sharing information. And as I described before, the planning and placement team meetings are really to design evaluations and determine eligibility for special education. And they have different responsibilities with different agencies and organizations. So transition conferences, birth to three, PPTs are part of the school district, but please know that the school district invites birth to three to those planning and placement team meetings to come, as well as you. And families can bring whoever that they choose, and you can invite whoever you would like to have with you at a PPT. And I know that Adriana and I have had this conversation that often it's good to have somebody there with you at the PPT that can help support you and help you to ask questions and help you feel comfortable, because it can be difficult to walk into a room or into a virtual room full of, you know, this cast of characters from the local education agency, from the school district. It can be challenging. So always feel free to bring somebody to support you in addition to your birth to three provider to those PPTs if you choose to. That is absolutely your right to be able to do that. If you do have any questions about PPTs, again, feel free to reach out to CPAC. Adriana is our lead for everything with early childhood. I am available. My contact information, Adriana's and Nicole's, are all on the last slide. Feel free to reach out to any of us, and we're always there to help and support you and to answer your questions. So with that, I guess it's the right time to say, do you have any questions? We'd be happy to answer your questions now if you have any. You can feel free to either unmute and ask them out loud. I guess, Jane, you can post them in Facebook Live, or you can post them in the chat on Zoom, whatever works best for you. And if you don't feel like asking questions now, you can always reach out to us at a later date.
Absolutely. I'm looking on Facebook and I'm not seeing any questions there, but folks, take a minute if you have them, and feel free if you're on Zoom to unmute if you have any questions or comments. And if not, as Andrea said, we can take them always in the center or to either Nicole or Andrea's personal. We can help you get connected to that if you reach out to us. Or if you screenshot this picture, you'll have everybody's contact. Were there any other thoughts you wanted to add? I think I do have a poll for those of you who are in. Oh, no, it's not going to let me poll today. Adriana, I don't know if you're able to launch it. Can you try? It just tells me my polls are inactive.
I see it. Would you like me to launch it?
Sure, if you can launch it, it wouldn't let me.
Let's see if I can. It looks like it's launched.
Yes, yes.
So it's very quick. If the few of you that are here are able to fill that out for us, we would appreciate that. I wanted to add one comment while you guys were talking. I'm not sure who was saying about the fact that a provider comes out and works with the family and maybe only 1 hour a week, but that family can reinforce that session over and over and over and over again throughout the week. And that was something that I just kind of stumbled upon when my son was in birth to three, that I didn't know what to do with him. So I would take out the things that the birth to three provider left. For example, he really liked the wheelbarrow walking with a round mat in front of him that moved with him. And so we probably wheelbarrow walked with that mat 30 hours a week because that was something he really liked to do. And it built his upper body strength, which was what the goal was. So I think that parents who are currently in birth to three to recognize that you've been given a lot of tools and that they will actually last beyond the 3-year-old age and a lot of other parts of your life that they will stick with you. It's knowing what your child needs and helping them have the opportunity. Even in school, they're not going to do the same thing with them over and over again all week as they're trying many different things. So if parents do know what is happening with their child, whether it's birth to three or in school, repeating that and reinforcing it is part of the conversation. How can I know what you're doing with my child so I can repeat and reinforce at home? And in the interest of no questions, if you guys have anything you want to add, otherwise we can log off early. And Jennifer gives us all thank you. Thanks, Jen, for joining us.
I'll just echo that. I appreciate everyone that joined today, and we hope that this information was helpful. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
And I just dropped
Perfect,
our
Andrea.
email addresses into the chat. And thanks for taking, almost an hour of your time today. We appreciate it. And we're happy to answer your questions if you think of anything in the future.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
I've stopped recording. Whoops, almost.